We've all been there, that nagging feeling of never doing enough, never being enough. It creeps into our work lives, our family lives, and especially when we're caring for a loved one with dementia. The constant demands, the emotional toll, the endless to-do list, it can leave us feeling overwhelmed, totally depleted. But what if I told you there's another way? What if you could find that sense of balance amidst all the challenges of dementia care? What if you could discover that deep down, you are enough? On today's episode, we're diving deep into the world of work life balance and dementia care. We'll explore practical strategies, mindset shifts, and self care techniques to help you navigate this demanding journey while honoring your own well being. Get ready to reclaim your time, your energy, and your sense of self because you deserve it. Caregiving, especially for someone with dementia, can feel all consuming. It's easy to lose yourself in the constant demands and emotional toll. But finding balance isn't about achieving a perfect schedule. It's about inner resilience and prioritizing self care. It's about recognizing that enough is a state of being and not a destination. Give yourself permission to set boundaries, ask for help, and nurture your well being. When you prioritize your own needs, you show up as a more present and empowered caregiver. And to guide us on this journey of self discovery and balance, I'm thrilled to welcome Rebecca Olson, an international life coach and podcast host who helps career focused parents overcome overwhelm and embrace their inner enoughness. Through her coaching program and podcast, Ambitious and Balanced Working Moms, Rebecca. Oh, that's the name of the podcast. Ambitious and Balanced Working Moms. Rebecca has empowered thousands of parents to find confidence, clarity, and control over their time and energy. She's known for her straight talking style, her love of big earrings, and her passion for helping individuals create a life of balance and fulfillment, both personally and professionally. So let's dive in. And I want to thank my listeners for joining us once again. Rebecca, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I am, in fact, wearing some really big earrings today that are quite delightful. So
I don't get quite that big, but I've got the medium size ones.
it's my short hair. My short hair really lets me really pop big earrings, so I love it.
That makes sense. So I forgot in our pre-call, because it was before the holidays, you haven't had direct caregiving responsibilities, have you?
I am not.
Okay.
I got 2 young kids. That is what I care for. I mean, which is caregiving, but I know there's something different, right, about caring for kind of the generation above us and so forth. And so many I know of my generation is currently, that sandwich generation that's doing both. Thankfully, I'm not there yet. But I'm excited to talk about what, sustainable work-life balance is and the principles, because it really is something that kind of transcends all circumstances. That's one of the things that I focus on as a coach is like sustainable work-life balance. That is like 100% something that you own, right? Ownership. Because a lot of times we put our circumstances as the thing that allows us to experience balance. Like, our job, only having a certain amount of things in our job to do, a certain season of the year where that's not so stressful, or our kids being a certain age, or our health being a certain way, or our partner helping out, or, whatever it might be. We put a lot on our circumstances to kind of allow us to feel balanced or not. And I'm not saying that circumstances don't play a part. I mean, they make things easier or not, for sure. But if we keep thinking that it's our circumstances that really create our ability to feel balanced, then we're going to keep trying to chase perfect circumstances and sort of instead of just taking ownership over ourselves, our habits, our behaviors, our thoughts, and create that life for us no matter what. That was a long intro.
That's okay. This is a very casual conversational show. And so I just want to welcome you to like the less than 10 guests in almost 400 episodes that aren't caregivers. There aren't too many of you, but it's like, so feel lucky that you're in that club and not my club. And when you were saying that your caregiving is for young kids, my caregiving right now is for aging golden retriever who's very demanding.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
She's very social. and she wants to go, go, go all the time. It's like, I don't know how I got such a go, go, go dog. She don't care where we go either. So, and it's hard to balance like what she needs and what I want to do.
Yeah, definitely.
It's actually,
Particularly when it comes to animals, I feel like, because you're like, wait, I'm the human here. Like, I get to determine this. And they're like, no, no, no. I'm the animal. I decide. It's
I'm,
quite an
yep, but
interesting dynamic.
I'm going to look at you with those sad brown eyes, like I'm so neglected and unloved and make you feel so guilty. But
Yeah.
guilty,
So,
that's a good place to start.
yeah.
I know while I was caring for my mom, and this lapped over from childhood, is just not ever feeling like whatever I did was enough. Fortunately, and I'm sure they didn't intend this, but my parents were very good about communicating that whatever I had done was not enough. It's like, oh, you got B plus on your, B plus average on your report card. Why wasn't it A's? That kind of, you know, I think it might
Yeah.
almost be like a generational expectation, but man, taking care of my mom just whew, amplified that feeling something fierce because, you love them and you want to do the best you can for them. I wanted to give her as much joy as possible, best quality of life. And that
Like we
required
let
learn.
we we let them affect our hearts the most, right? Because we're so close to them, and so their words and their intentions and all the things mean a lot to us and have a bigger effect.
That's true. And with Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia, they don't always couch their words, so to speak.
Right.
And some
Right.
people say, well, it breaks down their filters, so that's in the back of your mind, like, ooh, does she really mean this? And fortunately for me, my mom's personality didn't change too much. Some people get more mellow, some people get way less mellow. They go
Yeah.
the opposite direction, which thankfully she just stayed pretty much her. You just couldn't, there wasn't reasoning and like, hey,
Right.
like let's
Yeah.
take that down. There was none of that. So,
It's her way or the highway.
well, it was always her way.
Right.
With
Well, there you go.
Alzheimer's, there was no balance. It was you just do it and you do well, if you like it or not, or you had to do things were the right choice, like moving her to memory care, even though that was 1,000% what she did not want.
Yeah. Of course. Of
So,
course.
but that was important because I knew her living at my house with my business, which was home based. It just wasn't going to work. She was going to need a caregiver so I could do my things. And
Yeah.
in memory care, she had friends. She got into mischief, nothing harmful, just kind of annoying. And she kind of had a purpose because being younger, she was always offering to help other residents. She'd
Mm.
lean out her door and, if I could be of any help, just let me know. And I'd be like, oh God, please don't.
Yep.
Because,
Yep.
then it's just blind leading the blind. So let's
But
see.
what you're starting to get into is really talking about, the effect that other people have on us, our loved ones have on us, and how it affects like our way, our ability, our self-esteem, even, right? Like our ability, our self-assuredness, our confidence. I mean, we're kind of all saying the same thing in that, right? It's like when we're constantly being I'm not gonna say it's I hate using the word like degraded or it's because I don't think that's their intention, but it has that feel to it, like when we're constantly feeling kind of cut down a little bit, and that has its toll on how we think about ourselves, like our belief in self on some level. And I talk about this a lot when I talk about balancing life as a parent, but it's about there has to be this unshakable view of self. That's what I like to call it. Like that I get to believe whatever I want to believe about myself and my life and my potential and my choices and the things that are important to me, my values. Like I just get to believe whatever I want about myself always. Like nobody else gets to dictate that to me. It doesn't matter if my mom or my dad or my kids or whoever believes or agrees with me, they can believe whatever they want. And they could say whatever they want. I am still going to believe this, right? Like the kind of that's the kind of like foundational confidence that is required. Certainly for working parents to kind of balance all of life. And I can only imagine that becomes infinitely more important when you have parents that are struggling with these illnesses.
How do we get to that state of mind and not, slip over the line into navigating life with an arrogant attitude like, well, I know I'm, XYZ and I really don't care what you think. Because I know somebody that's like that. They're very confident in themselves and they come across as an arrogant jerk. It's really annoying. And I've been for most of my life, my family's always like, "Oh, you're so negative," which I think is a perspective. And at this point, it's like, no, actually, I'm not. Somebody will say that to me. I'm like, no, no, that's your narrative, and you can live with it, but no, I'm not.
Right.
It's just, it's perspective. But there's times when I hear myself and I think, man, am I starting to sound like an arrogant jerk? Because I don't want to be that, but I also want to let them know, like, I'm not buying what you're selling about what you think how I'm representing this situation or whatever. So how do we navigate? Because especially if we're a sandwich caregiver caring for children as well as parents or other older family members. And side note, I just recently learned that the majority of the population doesn't know what that term means.
Yeah, I think it's still a newish term, to be honest. Like it was only in the last year, and it's that I think I really like looked it up, and I'm like, people are describing my generation in this way. Like, what does this mean? I was like, oh, I totally know what this means, and I do have several. I'm starting to, have several friends that are fitting into this category, and it's like, I get it, I get it. So, yeah, I think when it comes to arrogance, it's not about what you believe, it's how then you decide to interact with what other people believe, right? Because it's one thing to say, I believe this and I don't care what you believe. And the way you say that, like literally the energy you have behind saying that, like makes a huge difference on how it's received on the other side, versus saying, I believe this and I hear your perspective on that and I could understand why you'd come to that perspective. I think this because of X, Y, or Z, or this is like why I've landed on this. Like, I think there's in some scenarios with close people, you might end up having a longer conversation about the various differences that of opinions and perspectives. But I think it's really all about how you decide to say, I basically decline whatever you believe, and I'm going to state what I believe and how the energy behind it. Are you trying to I mean, it's like, are you trying to push something on them? Are you trying to be aggressive? Are you trying to reject them? Like, what's the energy behind why you're even telling them what you believe and why you have to state it that way, right? Or is it coming from a place of compassion, understanding, connection? That kind of energy is going to feel totally different, even if you were saying exactly the same words.
That's really helpful. Because years ago, so when I was in my 30s, so talk about like 25 years ago, Jesus. We had an employee that was older than me, and I would make a comment like, come out of the photography studio, be like, whew, some families, It's just a statement.
Yep.
He's like, why are you complaining? You're complaining all the time. Eh? What? So I
See that as a
started
complaint. Right.
I started listening to myself. I'm like, that's just a statement. Like like I didn't say some families are the worst. I was just like, man, some families are challenged. Whatever. It could have been a lot of fun. There was no adjective to describe. It must have just been my energy. So I started listening, and
Yeah.
well, I was probably tired from photographing a wild family for an hour, but and I've just gotten to the place where it's like, you know, that might be how I express myself, and you need to like start hearing it differently because it's not negative, and you're being more negative thinking that way is kind of where I'm coming from. But the reason I was asking is if you're a sandwich caregiver, you're dealing with kids and their teachers and family, and you're taking care of, say, your parent, and you're working, and somebody at work lobs, some constructive criticism at you, and you're like, no, I'm not picking that one up. It's like that's where I was going with that one because I'm like, you don't obviously don't want to come
Right.
across as a jerk to
Right.
your
Right.
your colleagues or your boss or kids teacher.
Yeah.
We got to navigate the world in a positive way, even though sometimes that's really hard. So
Yeah.
how do we communicate like boundaries? It's really, really hard as a caregiver to set boundaries, and I'm not really sure why. I didn't have that problem with my kid.
Hmm.
I just stump her with
So, yeah, the way I like to think about boundaries is oftentimes in our mind, we think about it's, other people cross our boundaries. We tend to say that, and I don't actually think that's ever possible. Somebody can't ever cross your own boundary. A boundary is in place for you. It is to indicate your edge, if you will, and also what you're going to do should something cross that edge. That's really what it's about. So it's not, it's saying, when you say this, I'm going to respond in this way. That's a boundary. It's, I can't control if you ever talk to me like that or if you ever say that because I don't get to control your words and your energy and all of the things. But should you ever say that to me like that or use these types of words or, start a conversation in this way, I'm I'm going to walk out of the room. That's my boundary. I'm not going to engage in it, right? And so that's different than saying, I need you to not ever say that to me again. You can't ever control it. It's never something that hopefully they do that because they love you, but they're also human and like the likelihood of them not being able to do something is unlikely for the forever future, right? So it's not about that. It's about really focusing on what you can control, which is always just you and your response to things. So, I think about this as we're having this conversation. It's actually making me think a lot about my grandmother who did not suffer from dementia or Alzheimer's, but she was a fiery woman to the day she died. And there were things that she would say that were very offensive that I can remember from a very young age even. And as she got older, it just got worse. And her editing was way less, as she got older. And there would be times that I would just and I knew it hurt her feelings, at times it was like, Grandma, I'm sorry, I can't engage in this conversation right now. Like I feel really worked up over it. I'm gonna walk away for a moment. I'll be back. I love you a lot. I'm gonna walk away for a moment and come back, and then I'll help you make dinner or whatever it is. But I had to because I knew whatever was gonna come out of my mouth was gonna then be offensive to her, and then I was gonna show up and respond to her in ways I didn't want to, and then that would feel even worse. So it was like it was better for me to just take care of myself, whether she really liked it or not. And I that's where boundary holding, really becomes really powerful is when you let it be within your own wheelhouse instead of trying to get somebody else to ever do something.
well, telling somebody don't ever talk to me like that again just sounds like a challenge. You say that to me and it's not going to go over well, even if it's like, oh, maybe I should have said it that way. It's still like fires up that lizard brain fight or flight part of us that just wants to be like,
Yeah.
also you. And I can relate. My paternal grandmother lived to 103, so she was born in 1918, and so there would be times we'd have conversations, and my daughter would be present. So she's the great granddaughter, and she would refer to um, black people as the Negroes or the colored
Yes.
people. And my poor daughter would just cringe and die a little bit inside. And it was always a reference, and it was never overtly racist. It was
Right.
generational, and it was really hard. Um, but I never
My
corrected her.
my sister-in-law is Hispanic. She's from El Salvador. And my grandma would always call her Mexican. And it didn't matter how much she was like, eventually she stopped. It was like, look, but that it was highly offensive to her. And she went as far as she felt like she could. And then she's like, I'm going to drop this. But then eventually my grandma actually figured it out. Thankfully. But it was many, many years. It was a long time.
It's hard to unlearn some of those things, and I think
It is.
we need to be mindful of some of that. But yeah, it's hard because there's so much pushback on, like politically correct speech. And it's like, well, it's not really politically correct. It's just we've kind of shifted because our understandings from like your sister-in-law's perspective, you know, you probably wouldn't have thought twice about it, but she educated you, and it's like, oh, okay, yeah, see, that's bad,
Right,
and
right, right,
that's just
right.
evolution, I think. So it's kind of important, but yeah, it's a
But
challenge.
I would imagine this kind of internal conflict comes up all the time. It's like, what do I engage in with my aging parent? What do I decide I'm gonna correct them on, try to get them to do that they don't want to do, like, shepherd them toward, where there's resistance, where you're dealing not just with their illness, but you're dealing with their generation, you're dealing with their physical ailments, you're dealing with, your own restrictions and so forth. It's like constantly having to decide what battle am I gonna pick and which do I not, and how do I not feel exhausted through that process? Because that's really because it takes a lot of energy to decide to engage or not engage, constantly in these moments.
Well, it's really tough with somebody living with some form of dementia because you can't argue with them, you can't reason with them. At least in the middle to later stages, maybe in the earlier stages, you might have better luck with that. That's been quite a long time with in the past with my mom, so it's hard to remember. And
Yeah.
it's just so you have to you really don't have much choice. I mean, you do have a choice, either not to engage and argue, which is not always easy, or make situations worse.
Right, right.
Not fun choices. So how do we? Because you hit on the nail on the head, is like constantly having to like throttle your own thoughts
Yeah.
and feelings and emotions and kind of stuffing them in the pocket is exhausting. And then you're doing all this other physical stuff. So how do we navigate, like you talk about self-care? Is that more physical, mental, both? Which way do you want to
Yeah,
jump?
that's exactly where I would lead this conversation, because it is about self-care, but true self-care is is something that actually takes care of your internal self, not just your external self. Right? So there are things externally, a massage or a bath or something like that, that might, if you let it, have an internal effect, but ultimately that's the goal of any self-care activity, right? And so that's why for me, self-care, even spending 5 minutes in the morning with my journal, it's not even just the 5 minutes to myself. It's actually the time that I'm spending getting some of my thoughts out that feels like I'm caring for my internal self, that actually lets me feel rejuvenated from that experience. And that's ultimately what a self-care practice should do. Anything you're doing for yourself, right? It should feel, you should walk away feeling a little bit lighter, feeling cared for, feeling loved, feeling heard, feeling, what if you think about what you experience when you walk away from a time with a loved one that you feel really cared for and loved by, like, we want that same experience. You just want to create it with yourself. That then it's a self-care activity, right? So, and I mean, in this case, it's there, I think, and I'm thinking back to a client actually that wasn't all that long ago that is caring for her aging parents, and also, knee deep in managerial work at work and all the things. And we talked a lot about what did she need to do coming out of these moments with her mom that would help her kind of refill her bucket again, recognizing that it wasn't probably alcohol, it wasn't Netflix, and it wasn't zoning out on social media, all things that, she was doing, working parents do to just try to like feel like they can unplug, right? Because that's kind of what it's so easy to do those things, but you don't walk away from those experiences actually feeling cared for and loved. So we had to start talking about what do you do knowing that you walk away from almost every interaction with your mom feeling totally drained. How do you care for yourself in these moments? How do you care for your internal self, right? So for me, it's always about kind of being really honest with how you're feeling and thinking, and having space for that level of honesty, no matter how terrible those thoughts or emotions are. It's okay to feel really, really bad about your situation sometimes. It's okay for that to be frustrated, to be angry that you are, this is the season of life that you're in. Like, all of those emotions and feelings and thoughts are totally valid, and they need a space to be kind of heard and and feel like they're cared for, right? So that could be through journaling, through talking it out. Like we talked about a couple of friends that she started to lean on to that where she could just speak much more rawly about what she was experiencing, which she felt so much, the weight felt so taken off of her when she wasn't alone. So that's really the heart of it.
That makes sense.
Bless
Thank you. I was trying to do that quietly. I just recently learned because I've been working with an internal medicine doctor, which is a whole unique experience. My cortisol levels are backwards. So in the morning they should be higher and they should dip at night. Mine are low in the morning and go up. I'm like, okay, well,
Are you a
what do
night
we do
owl?
about? I mean, as I said before we were recording, I'm way too healthy for all these dang doctor visits. So 2025, we're cutting back on going to the doctor. But we're trying to prevent hormonal migraines without necessarily taking a lot of hormone replacement therapy because my general physician is not necessarily dialed into that.
Yeah.
I'm working
Yeah.
on him. But it kind of came down to like she was asking me like, well, are you like chronically stressed? And I'm like, no, not really. I mean, like, is my life perfect? No. Is it ever going to be perfect?
Yeah.
Probably not. I'm like, I'm fine with where I'm at. Like, there are goals that I'm working towards that should help improve some of the things I don't currently like. But then there'll probably just be other things I don't like. So it's like, this is just life.
Yeah.
And so we talked about it. And because I am everything, fading memories and the speaking and everything that gets done, it's all me. Taking care of the dog, making dinners, you know, making sure my household doesn't fall apart. It's all me. And I'm very, very organized. So I'm really good at scheduling myself and making stay on time, getting everything done. And she said, well, what do you do to relax? Well, I read and I craft. And she's like, do you ever do things that isn't doing? I'm like, what do you mean? Like sleep? She's like, no, like just checking into your body. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, I'd already told you I started meditating more. It's like, I don't have a brain for meditation because my brain wanders around trying to figure out what needs to be done next. What are we doing for dinner? Or when I wake up in the morning, sometimes before I go to sleep, what's on my schedule for tomorrow? What am I going to have for breakfast? I like plan out the morning so that I'm like ready to go when I wake up. Apparently I need to stop doing it, but I don't think that's going to happen. That's just how I'm wired. But earlier today, I was feeling a little like breathy and stressed. And I'm like, I just had a Zoom meeting. Why am I feeling this way? I'm like, let's just pause, finish up these emails and pause and like, how am I feeling? I'm like, I didn't do my stretches after my workout because I was running behind. Shoulders are feeling tight. So
Yeah.
after this,
Yeah.
gonna check in and do some stretching, maybe just, I don't know, go out on the deck and get some sunshine on my face and just check into the body for 5 or 10 minutes and see if that makes me feel better. It was just very interesting because the crafting is an interesting,
It's almost like an outlet.
it is an outlet and it fires up all the different areas of your brain, which is very good for your cognitive health, but it's also very meditative, which I don't understand how you can be both at the same time, but it is true because I've experienced it.
Sure.
And I told her, I said, but it takes like the other night I had a little extra time. I'm like, let me just whip out a Valentine card because I have a club that gets together. We make them. And I think that happens like a day and a half after I get back from a work trip. So I'm like, let me work on that. And I did something and it's enjoyable. But she's like, but that was doing. I'm like, fine. I guess it just takes a little longer to get into the meditative part.
I just did a little like 8-minute video for some of my clients on this because I think the point of this is to not gloss over the feelings that you're feeling, but to give them a little bit of space, right? And even while you're doing something like crafting, your brain could be working something out, right? Like we can do that in the background in our subconscious, but but we got to let the body work it out too, right? Otherwise we kind of hold on to our emotions and our stress. And so I describe it, I give my clients, I'll give you my little tutorial on how I like to think about emotions. I find this fascinating because before I became a coach, I had no idea that this was even a thing, right? Like, and now it's like transformed my life and transforms my clients' lives as I think about it. But emotions, when we talk about quote feeling our feelings, that feels really weird to say that, but um, our body, like under a microscope, when we experience a feeling, we can literally see our cells vibrate. Right? Literally, our cells vibrate. Not only that, we can actually see that they vibrate in a pattern. They vibrate in a circular pattern within our body. And so what happens, like the visual I like to think of is like you start feeling an emotion. So maybe you feel stressed out about something, and the emotion like enters your body. It's usually like in your chest region. So it enters your body, and your body starts to vibrate. Literally, all the little cells start to vibrate, and it starts to feel a little uncomfortable. And then your conscious mind clues into the fact that you're starting to feel stressed out, and we stop the whole experience from happening because we don't want to feel stressed out. So we're like, hold on, I don't need to stress about this. It's okay. I'm going to make this all work. Like, I got this all together. There's nothing to worry about. Come on, Rebecca, we can give ourselves that little internal pep talk, whether we're kind of conscious of it or not. Really, literally, what we've done is we've stopped our body from having the vibrational experience. Like, we've literally stopped the vibration. So the next time we feel stressed, which could not be that long later, the stress enters our body, and then it gets stopped at the point that we had stopped the other vibrations, right? So now you've got stress that's layered on top of stress. It's going to keep doing that until, well, we all kind of know and have experiences of, until we like let it all out somehow. We explode it in some way. It comes out of us in ways that we really don't want to, or towards people that we don't intend to, or, we blow things out of proportion. And usually, even though we feel bad about that, because it's usually directed at someone we didn't mean to direct it at, we actually also feel better in our body. Our body like has let go of the vibrations that was in there because we let ourselves feel the feelings, right? So when I think about something like meditation, which I'm not the biggest meditator either, but I can sit for a couple of minutes and focus on the sensations going on in my body, the literal vibrations, the feelings that I'm feeling, my heart palpitating, the radiation that may be coming out of my heart down my arms, the knot in my stomach, the like pit that I feel, the depths that I could feel somewhere. Like I could put all these words to it and let my conscious mind think about that, because all I'm doing is focusing now on how my body is experiencing a vibration from the feeling. And it's amazing to me how quickly it actually will stop when I actually give it space, when I let myself feel it. It usually kind of grows a little bit, and then it like dissipates really fast, as if the whole feeling experience that is happening at a cellular level has like, I've let it all happen, and then I let it go, and it just is remarkable to not carry all some of that weight around, right? And so learning to have practices like that is really useful when it comes to self-care and processing really big feelings that can come up when we're in demand on so many levels from all areas of life.
Yeah. Well, now you've convinced me to continue my intermittent practice of the like 5 to 10 minute morning meditations that Peloton does. And they have ones that are called body scans. They have morning meditation, which generally incorporate body scans. And then they have some that they actually call body scans. So now I'm just going to have to go check those out a little more and be a little bit more mindful about doing them because they do really help.
They do. I mean, and just experiment with like, I'm willing to just try this for a while. Let me see if this makes any difference for me. If these experiences or the stress or whatever just comes up less, if I just give myself some space to do these body scans and process the emotions. I mean, that's really it. That's all you're doing.
Yeah, I think I don't have process of emotions most of the time, but it's like the busyness of doing all the things that I want to accomplish. So it's like somehow need to process that, I guess. I don't know. It's like
I mean,
sometimes knowledge is more annoying than anything.
the thoughts and the feelings are all connected to each other, right? So all of those thoughts about all the things you have to do and all of the things that you are trying to get done and so forth, and how far you are on any number of them, like there's a feeling that's associated to that your body's holding on to, and that's kind of what the scan is going to help you figure out on some level.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So let's see. We've talked about um let's see. We've talked about boundaries and we've talked about self-care. What am I missing? I know I'm glitching on something here.
Yeah, one of the things that we had touched on that I think is a really important part of balance, and this just kind of, I love that we're like kind of umbrella-ing this, if you will, underneath this idea of like believing in yourself no matter what. That's where we started, like that unshakable view of self. And one of the things I think that's really important within that belief about yourself is what I like to call your enough triad. It's I am enough, I am good enough, and I am doing enough. And you get to believe those three things about yourself no matter what, no matter how many things you've accomplished today, no matter if things turned out the way you wanted to or not, whether the response you got from your loved one, your kid, your boss, or whatever, was exactly what you wanted or not. Like you just always get to believe that I am enough, I am good enough, and I am doing enough. And I focus on those three because when it comes to balance, at least, enoughness, as I like to say it, is a really, really foundational part of of work-life balance. Like that's kind of what we just want to feel satisfied in every area of life. And satisfaction, like another way to say satisfaction is just saying it's enough. Like we've reached the point where we can feel satisfied or we feel like it's enough, right? So I like to use that term a lot because we often think about, particularly as women, that we're never doing enough and that we're never living up to the standard and that we can always be doing more and somehow we're always behind. And there's this feeling of like, I'm not enough. And then that can transfer when it comes to parents, it can transfer into like not being enough of a daughter, not being enough in some way, shape, or form, right? And so that really cultivating belief that I am enough, I'm good enough, and I'm doing enough all of the time is going to be really helpful in creating that like view of self that's unshakable. And so I call it the enough triad. I think it's really important. Like, and the mindfulness practices that we're talking about actually really tie into all of this, like the self-care pieces of it, because you can the way you start to build that sort of mindset is through repetition. Really, to be honest, it's through practice. It's through thinking those thoughts regularly, even when it's hard to think them. It's through journaling exercises or affirmation exercises or talking it out loud. But you can find evidence for how you are enough and that you're doing enough right now, no matter what, all of the time. And it's just letting your mind focus on how that's true instead of kind of figuring out how that's not true or finding evidence or kind of poking holes in how that's, not possible.
Well, with dementia care, that's really easy because it's just, you never feel like you're doing enough. You're not,
And
and I'm not
could
sure.
always do more.
I
Okay.
mean, you could, but I think, and this is something that one of my new support group members wants to talk about is the struggle of not feeling like you can fix it. He's taking care of his wife, so this slightly more of a masculine thought process, but it's
Yeah.
pretty similar to, like I can't fix it is pretty similar to I'm not doing enough. They're the same feeling, just
Yeah. Yeah.
verbalized differently. And there's nothing you can do. They're going to get worse. And it's an awful, awful journey for everybody involved. And I don't really know why we aren't better at just saying, they're clean, they're safe, they're fed, they're relatively happy. That's enough. It was
Yeah.
hard for me to get to that point with my mom. Um, and I don't know if it's because of the love and the connection and, all the things you want to do for them. I don't know why we put that on ourselves. It's a
But
head scratcher.
But what you're talking about is like defining the enough point. And I think that that's really important. I do that a lot with my clients. Like we define, like, what's the line that you determine is enough? And like, let's actually put words to it. So your conscious mind knows what you get to decide is like, you've met the standard that you want to meet. So like consciously think about that standard, have it written down, talk to people about it so that people can hold you accountable to that, so that when you constantly are trying to go above and beyond that and you're kind of at the sacrifice of yourself to do it, and you're exhausted by it, people could call you out on it, or you at least your conscious mind at least has something to come back to that says, no, remember you said that this was the line, and that you're meeting all of the things that you want to as long as you do this. Of course, if you spent more time and you killed yourself even more, there is more you could do, but there's like the cost benefit analysis of that, right? Like, is it really worth it? I talk about this when I have like doctors and nurses that I work with, because literally, if they worked more hours, they would save more lives. And for them, there's a hard line for them with that. It's like, I've just worked 15 hours, I'm exhausted, and I haven't seen my family. But if this one patient is dying, literally, like, how do I go home? How do I justify this? It's like, well, we get to decide what's enough here, and there's a cost benefit analysis of you staying versus you going, and we have to kind of put some language to that. Otherwise, your heart is always gonna like have that pull towards doing more, being more, contributing more, but at a sacrifice that is rather costly.
I like the idea of setting a limit, like a goal. Like this, I'm gonna make sure she's fed, she's clean, she's dressed properly, because that can always be a challenge. She's safe, she's happy. That's it. Because I was just reading an article about people that want to be parents, and they go down the IVF route, and they're like, we're just gonna do 2 rounds, and there's always that, well, if we try this and if we try that, and maybe the next time, maybe this, maybe, and the next thing you know, they're $100,000 in debt and they don't have any children. And that's just a
Yep.
tragic, it's kind of similar to dementia care, because well, if I just try this music therapy or this, engagement thing, or if we do this outing, or it's like, it's exhausting.
Yeah.
And you know what? My mom was happy sitting around shooting the breeze. It was very difficult for me, because when you cannot have a conversation with somebody, it's a little hard to shoot the breeze. And it was much easier when I engaged with like her. So my mom's name was Diane. She befriended Diane Stewart. They befriended Diane Rubinsky. So you just got all 3 Dianes together, which was confusing. And they would talk to each other, and occasionally you could interject. So you had a little bit of a more normal conversational style, and they entertained each other with repeating the same crap over 500 times in an hour, and like you're over there going, oh, I want to bang my head on the wall.
Yeah, totally.
People thought I was crazy, because I would take my mom and one of the other Dianes. We'd go to the nail salon, we'd go to the park, we it was almost always easier with the 2 of them, because they could engage with each other better than I could engage with her.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
people were like, can't believe you took them to the park and you brought them both back. And I'm like, there are rangers there, like pretty easy license plate over there to read. I don't think I would have gotten away with leaving them at the regional park.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just,
but
it
just
was hard.
deciding. Yeah, for sure. And I think the reason why we always want to do more is that there's a feeling there. That it's the feeling of not enoughness. It's the feeling of not living up. It's the feeling of being a terrible a terrible parent for mine, or terrible daughter, or whatever it is, and the inadequacy and the failure. Like, if it feels like we got to keep going and going and going, and we do that to avoid those feelings, versus recognizing that there's a limit, and we could feel good about what we do at that limit, but it's also going to come with some feelings of like we should be doing more. And I'm okay with those feelings too, because I know that my standard is this, right? And so we're never going to get rid of all of the icky feelings that comes when we make trade-offs and when we make decisions, right? Like, that's okay. We can, as long as we feel really good about why we're doing what we're doing. It's always about feeling good about the decisions we make, and having kind of reasoning that makes sense to us, and feeling good about that.
I love that. So so let's wrap it up. See if we can put a nice little bow on this whole thing. So so we're gonna put a standard on our care. We're gonna say these are the things that are the most important. Safety. They're fed. They're dressed properly.
Whatever you
and they're
decide it to
happy.
be, yeah.
Because I think we put a lot more expectations on what we think they need than what they really do need.
Yeah.
That's also really hard. So we're gonna start there, and then
I would post that somewhere.
Oh yeah, no, right.
To remember it.
No, I think it should be written down in places that you're going to see it. Maybe have a loved
Yeah.
one or somebody
I,
move it around. So it's like,
I've
oh, wait.
I've met the standard of care when they are X, 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 and X, right? I'm exceeding expectations when as long as this, and this happens, right? You got to frame it in some really positive way. I am enough as a daughter as long as this happens, right? Like that's it. For sure. You
No,
start there.
I love that. Where were you like 7 or 8 years ago? So we're gonna okay. So we've written it down. We've established a standard that we're gonna accept. That's all up to us. So how are we gonna process those icky feelings? We're gonna journal them. I'll let you fill that in.
Yeah, this is where the self-care, we circle back into the self-care practices, something that's going to help you care for the other emotions that are a part of it, because you're going to have to process those feelings that come with feeling like you should do more. Because just because you wrote down the standard doesn't mean that you're not going to think that you should be doing more. Of course, you're going to think that. You're going to just choose not to, because the sacrifice of whatever the cost benefit analysis doesn't make sense. And so that's going to come with those feelings. And now you got to choose, how are you going to deal with those feelings? How do you want to care for the internal self? Are you going to journal about it? Are you going to talk it out? Like, you got to find a place where you can very honestly and rawly speak them out, whether that's just to yourself or to somebody else. I've had a variety of apps that I just talk to myself on, like a voice note, because sometimes verbal processing is better for me. And so I'll do that. Or is it, listening to affirmations or something that literally is going to help you shift the way you feel so you can release some of those icky feelings. And then we come back to that's where the emotional processing is. Maybe you do a body scan, you could do meditation, you could do yoga, so many things that you could do to process, but the goal of that is to process the feelings that are associated with making decisions to not do other things, to not go exceed those expectations. And that way you don't have the emotional pileup, if you will. And all the while, if we wanted to circle it back up again, it's to the goal really is to build for yourself that view of that level of confidence, that kind of enoughness within yourself, that belief in yourself that doesn't shift, like doesn't shift based on how much you do and what other people think or what they say to you, or whatever it is. It's like you just get to practice believing these things over and over and over again.
Yeah, that's something I've worked on for a while, and it's just like it because I had so many feelings of not doing enough, not being enough. And at the start of this year, I took on a new task to do some outreach to help accelerate getting booked for speaking jobs, something I absolutely don't want to do. So I gave myself some like not mental, but some goals to hit. Like when I get here, I want to do this. And then
Yeah.
one day, because I'm very visual, I I know my topic is very important, but it's not catching on just yet. And I know in a couple of years, going to be in such demand that I'll be getting more money and turning down people I don't want to deal with. So it's like
That's right.
to know that it's like I have to go start here and I know that's going to happen. And that
Mm,
mental picture in my head of
yeah.
being in demand
Yeah.
really helped get over I really don't want to make these phone calls and do this out and I don't like and like so far I haven't done a lot of it just yet. This is still early January when we're recording this. It hasn't been negative. So it's like it just you got to find those tools that work for you because
Yeah.
we can accomplish so much more than we think. We get in our own way, and I think we should start every day just reminding ourselves that we are enough. We do enough. What is your triad again? You think I could
I'm good
remember
enough.
this?
I am enough. I'm good enough. I'm doing enough.
There we go. Good enough. That was one I forgot
Yep.
because I have to practice some more. All the ways to find Rebecca are in the show notes, as you guys should know, but I always like to remind you just in case you forgot. I want to thank you for sharing. This was really great. We could have probably gone on for another hour or more, but people don't have time to listen to podcasts that long, at least not my audience. I really appreciate you sharing your wisdom, and hopefully you won't ever have to use your wisdom as a sandwich caregiver taking care of parents. Let's hope you just bypass that.
Yes, hopefully. But such a pleasure to be here, and thank you for tapping into work-life balance and bringing this to your audience. Appreciate it.